As regular visitors to this channel know, I do not do a lot of straight politics videos. I find it kind of boring covering day-to-day politics. But what is going on right now in the state of Pennsylvania, or I'm sorry, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, with one John Fetterman, who is running for Senate there to try and replace the retiring Pat Toomey, is so extraordinary that I have to discuss it. Even though lots of other people are talking about it, this is the most remarkable thing I have seen in American politics in my lifetime. Which, to be honest, I'm pretty young, but I have been following politics from a very young age. And so I have seen quite a bit over the last, and this has been, the last decade or so in American politics has been pretty extraordinary. Everything, going back to 2008 to the present, I remember all of that very vividly. And nothing like this has ever happened. What is going on with John Fetterman is a whole nother level from Joe Biden during the 2020 election. During 2020 election, we all knew, okay, Joe Biden, his best years are behind him. He's definitely going downhill cognitively. He can't present himself well. He can't really do interviews very well. He can't debate very well, although somehow they were able to get him through the debates, to his credit. And everyone understood, yeah, he's hiding in the basement because the more that we see him, the less people will like him and the less they'll respect him. But John Fetterman is way worse. He has been doing the same thing. He's been doing the hide in the basement strategy, coming out, making occasional speeches, fully scripted, taking no questions from the audience. And he's apparently also been doing some Zoom interviews with very, very friendly people, like left-wing activists. Not really any, real journalists, and certainly no one who would be at all combative or ask him tough questions. But yesterday, I believe, on the NBC Evening News, the one on, the local broadcast stations that airs at like 6:30 Eastern, I think, they aired a sit-down, in-person interview with John Fetterman, and I was shocked at how far gone he is mentally. The man is mentally disabled, and his campaign and his supporters are now stating that openly. They have pivoted rapidly from John Fetterman is fine, he's going to be, just doing just fine in his job. Sure, he stutters a little bit because he had a stroke. Maybe he'll misspeak from time to time, but, he's all there. To the man is mentally disabled, and if you criticize him for that, you're a bigot. So you have to vote for John Fetterman, or else you hate disabled people. And so the Democratic Party now, unlike with Biden, where the whole time they've said he's fine, they're now openly embracing the fact that John Fetterman is mentally disabled. Stacey Abrams, back in 2018, made a comment that at the time was easy to pass off as a gaffe. I remember Tim Pool got some yucks about it at the time, but not many other people took notice. But she was going over all these things. She was saying, the Democratic Party is black, the Democratic Party is female, the Democratic Party is disabled, which is a very funny statement if you think about it. But here we are, the prophecy of Stacey Abrams about the Democratic Party being disabled. It's coming true. And I don't mean that I have any problem with disabled people, but when you have someone whose disability is mental and they are running to be a member of the U.S. Senate, that's kind of like a paraplegic trying out to be a punter, for an NFL franchise. A paraplegic is never going to be a punter. John Fetterman is never going to be a statesman. He's obviously. The only reason, and here's the thing, this is what's interesting. Normies who actually think of senators as people who, deliberate, debate ideas, and, come to, independent conclusions by taking in information and discussing things amongst themselves and debating their ideas. Those people are being, if there's any of them left, they've been obliterated by this John Fetterman campaign. Because it's clear that the only purpose that this man serves is to be a vote in the Senate. He is a body on the Democratic side of the aisle. That is his whole entire utility, because there's nothing going on in there. He can't interact with other human beings. It's not possible for him. He can't participate in debates. He can't listen to other people talk. If you went to his office and you wanted to lobby him, and I don't mean that like as one of these nasty, lobbyists. I mean, like, if you're a normal voter and you wanted to knock on John Fetterman's door and say, hey, I'd really appreciate it if you vote for this bill acknowledging the Armenian genocide or something like that, some pet issue. He would not be able to interact with you. He would not be able to respond to you. He would not be able to listen to your argument and, give you an answer, yes or no. John Fetterman claims that he's getting better and that he's going to make a full recovery somehow. And I hope he does, for his sake. I mean, I don't like to see people who are debilitated like this. But as things stand, the man he's not there. He's gone. He needs not really a teleprompter. He needs a computer next to him to interpret the words that people say to him so he can read them on the screen. He can't understand spoken words. That apparently seems to be what it comes down to. He is, the part of his brain that handles speech seems to be critically disabled as a result of his stroke. Apparently he can read just fine. He understands if he reads a written word. But if you speak to him, you're not getting through. And likewise, if he tries to speak, he's not getting through to you. We've all heard John Fetterman try to talk. That's the thing. I thought it was limited to that. I thought it was, trying to recall the right words, which you see sometimes, like with people who have Alzheimer's or whatever. They'll forget certain words, and they'll be talking, and then they'll just stop, and they can't find the word. And I can understand that. People like that, it's not that they're dumb or that they're, mentally incapacitated. That's a minor thing. If you say the wrong words. And John Fetterman was a very extreme case of that. But it's still possible that even if you can't speak, that the thoughts in your head make sense and that they're coherent. What we witnessed, though, through this interview, his first in-person interview, is that he cannot process words, period. They don't make sense to him coming into his brain, and they don't make sense coming out. There is not one. It's not like, communication's a two-way street, and, he's a little bad at moving in one direction. No, he can't go in either direction. He can neither receive nor transmit information verbally, and frankly, we have no evidence that he can transmit information, through writing. We don't know that he writes his own tweets. That's the only writing that we've seen that is, even somewhat attributed to John Fetterman. And when he speaks, it doesn't make sense. So, frankly, I think it would be interesting, or I think informative for the voters, to see him try to respond, to try and write things out. Can he write, or does he write the same way that he speaks? What's going on there? He's like Woodrow Wilson level. He's worse than Joe Biden, as I already said. I think he might be close to Woodrow. Coincidentally, Woodrow Wilson also had a stroke while he was in office, and they just kept him around. They propped him up. That's where that term comes from. And his wife, ran the show. The Democrats are okay with this. And, Republicans might be too. I don't know. I think Republicans maybe are not this brazen. But in principle, I don't think they would mind it. They see Fetterman as just like Wilson, just as a body. He's going to fill a seat in the Senate, and they'll tell him, how he's supposed to vote on each bill. He'll go in, he'll cast his vote, and then he'll go home. And that'll be John Fetterman's job. That's all they need him for. They don't need him to think. They don't need him to speak. They don't need him to be able to communicate. And think about it. If Dr. Oz loses to John Fetterman, you always hear those jokes about, ex-candidate, he would lose to a ham sandwich if he ran for, governor or president or senate. Well, Dr. Oz seems to be the first person who will actually prove one of those jokes to be correct, because he very well might likely Excuse me. Gosh, I burped a little bit. He may very well lose to a vegetable. Now, do I think that Dr. Oz is really going to lose? No. And I think that I don't think that this stuff is helping Fetterman. I think that they're going for the sympathy vote at this point. And I don't think that's good, especially when black turnout was already not good. I don't think that people who grew up on the mean streets of Philly are going to respond well to this, to a very weak, feeble man who, is trying to troll for sympathy points when they already don't like him, probably because of his history. For those of you who don't know, John Fetterman, when he was mayor of some town somewhere, chased down a black jogger, a real jogger, not like that guy from Georgia who was not just jogging and was actually, breaking and entering. This guy was a real jogger, did absolutely nothing wrong. John Fetterman chased him down in his pickup truck and held him at gunpoint. And why, you might ask? Why did he do it? What was he under suspicion of? Well, it was simple. It was the crime of jogging while black. And believe it or not, that doesn't play well with black Democratic voters. And so on top of all that, Fetterman is going to look weak and pathetic. And I don't think necessarily that means that, Dr. Oz is going to become the candidate of black Pennsylvanians. But there's going to be a lot less of them who are thrilled to turn out and vote for John Fetterman. So I think that this interview was a disaster for him and his campaign. It's frightening to see how impaired he is. And again, it's not like there's actually real debate that goes on in the Senate. The way it works is each, backbencher, people who are not a member of leadership, of which there are like 4 people in the Senate. There are 4 people in the Senate who decide, who hammer out what's going to be in the bills and how the votes are going to go. And then the rest of the senators are just told what to do. John Fetterman was going to be one of those guys. He was going to be a cog in the wheel. And so he doesn't need his brain to work. He only needs his right arm to work so that he can go press that button or sign or whatever it is that senators do to cast their votes. Maybe raise his right hand occasionally. And I think he's certainly capable of that. And that's all the Democrats cared about. So to be clear before I end this off, this is not an endorsement of Dr. Oz. Not a fan of Dr. Oz. I thought it was pretty terrible. Although I did think that the idea of Dr. Oz being a senator was pretty funny when he first announced. And I still think it will be funny. In the end of the day, though, if he does end up winning this, he's just going to be a mediocre establishment Republican. I don't anticipate that Dr. Oz will ever be very good or interesting. He doesn't come across as a particularly outside-the-box thinker. I think he will just kind of like Fetterman. I think he will be someone that his party can rely on to just vote the way he's told. Now, is it possible that he proves me wrong? Sure, anything's possible. I hope I'm proven wrong. I thought that back in 2018, when DeSantis got in, I had no real reason to think that DeSantis would be a particularly good governor. I thought of it as, he was nice to Trump for the first couple of years of Trump's administration, so Trump returned the favor by endorsing him, and so therefore he was able to skate through the Republican primary here, and he was able to eke out a victory in the general election. And I didn't think much more of DeSantis beyond that. So, is it possible that Dr. Oz, could be a great senator? Sure. But unlike DeSantis, he does have quite a long record of doing bad things. He was, I don't think it's so fair to call him a proponent of maybe I almost said child drag surgery, child sex changes. I don't know if I would go that far in saying it, but he certainly highlighted it on his show, which, hey, maybe you're looking for juicy daytime television. Daytime television isn't exactly the classiest format. The only thing that I remember Dr. Oz siding with the right on was when he said that the schools shouldn't remain closed during COVID because he thought that the kids weren't spreading the virus. And by that point, he had probably already decided to run for Senate, would be my guess. But at this stage, I think I'd feel okay about voting for him if I lived in Pennsylvania. I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't, because maybe then I'd be more passionate. But, you know, I would probably be passionate about not voting for him for a second term. His first term, you know, maybe he hasn't done enough yet to piss me off. You know, he hasn't betrayed the base, you know, at every possible turn yet. You know, he's not Lindsey Graham yet, but he very well probably will turn out to be Lindsey Graham. Because Oz, he still has that, you know, he runs in those social circles with all of the worst people who hate us, with all the Hollywood people. And so he's still going to want to impress them more than his own voters, at least I think. So, with all that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.